Dr. Whitney Lohmeyer. She graduated from NC State in 2011 with a BS in Aerospace Engineering. While she was here, she led the AIAA student chapter, was funded by NC Space Grant and NCSU's undergraduate research office to conduct research in hypersonic aerodynamics under Dr. Fred DeJarnett. She was also funded by NASA Space Grant to intern at NASA Wallops, Sounding Rocket Operations Contract, and NASA Langley. As the only female in her class of approximately 90 students in her senior year, she started the Women in Aerospace group. After receiving her BS, she went on to MIT to get her MS and PhD. She was funded by the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Her graduate research was actually on satellite communication systems and particularly how components onboard communication satellites tolerate the space environment. So during her last year of graduate school, Dr. Lohmeyer started working at Google as a hardware engineer on a project that transitioned outside of Google in 2014, is now known as OneWeb. So OneWeb is launching hundreds of low Earth orbit communication satellites to provide global broadband internet and is on a mission to connect schools and healthcare centers. She has worked as a systems engineer for OneWeb for past 5 years, and in addition to her technical responsibilities, has represented the company at the United Nations International Telecommunications Union and US Federal Communications Commission. So please invite Whitney to the podium.
Thanks. So hello, everyone. There's a little bit of reverb. When I received the email to come and speak to you all today, my first thought was, me? Are you sure? My second thought was about my undergraduate graduation, which was in Reynolds Coliseum before there was air conditioning. And growing up down the street meant I also graduated in high school with Reynolds Coliseum without air conditioning. So if you're fanning yourself, no, it could be so much worse. I remember sitting in those chairs in 2011 with mixed emotions. On one hand, I was in shock by how quickly my time here had flown. On the other hand, I was so excited to never have another undergraduate PSET and that senior design was finally over. But there were 4 things that I wish I would have known when I was sitting in those chairs, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Number 1 is ditch the 5-year plan and have no regrets about it. Of course, you're going to need a canned response when you're in an interview and someone says, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" But don't pave that plan in stone. As hardworking graduates of this department, opportunities will present themselves, and you should give yourself the liberty to take them on. Look back on your choices for the good that came out of them, not with regret. I'd like to share with you a story out of a book by the author Mark Manson. It's about 2 musicians who were each kicked out of their bands days before their band's first record deal. The first was a guitarist, and when he was shown the door, he said, "How did this happen? What did I do wrong?" He made a vow to himself to create a new band that would be more famous and as successful than his old band ever thought about being. He was going to bathe in the tears of his betrayers. His name was Dave Mustaine, and Dave started the legendary heavy metal band Megadeth. Megadeth went on to sell over 25 million albums, and Dave is known as one of the most influential and brilliant heavy metal artists in history. But the band that kicked him out was Metallica. Metallica has sold over 180 million albums worldwide and is known as one of the best rock bands of all time. Later in life, Dave confessed he lived every day feeling like a failure because he would always be the guy that got kicked out of Metallica. This other musician I want to tell you about is a guitarist named Pete Best. When Pete, 3 days before the Beatles recorded their first album, they replaced Pete, their drummer, with Ringo Starr. Now, what's interesting about Pete was that he was the most professional and the best looking, arguably. Fans went wild for this guy. Once he was kicked out, he spiraled into depression, sued 2 of the Beatles, and eventually attempted suicide. He never had the riches of Dave from Megadeth. But later in his life, he said he was happier than he would have been with the Beatles. His definition of happiness changed. He realized that having a family and a loving wife, all while continuing to play the drums and tour Europe, was far more important. So the purpose here is that neither Dave nor Pete could really do anything about getting kicked out of their bands. But they were responsible for how they handled it and their definition of success and happiness. Number 2, it's a little boring, but if I could only give one piece of advice, it would be this one. Be financially savvy and maintain your health. Engineers are extensively trained in mathematics and are completely competent to understand finance, yet they often don't. They go to make a purchase later in life which requires credit, but realize they've never had a credit card. Or they're working for a startup that's trying to earn money, and they're the only one in the room that can't speak the lingo: EBITDA, ARPU, RSUs. So if you know some of this, I'm sorry, but I have to go through a few challenges and requests. Live like a student for as long as possible. You don't need a new car every year, and don't rush into home ownership. If you do this, my other challenges will be easier. If you don't have loans when you leave this Coliseum, give who's ever responsible a hug. And if you're the reason why, give yourself a hug, because you rock. And if you do have loans, that's okay. Pay them off as soon as possible. They will stay with you. And remember, they can't be discharged in bankruptcy. Don't skip out on health insurance. You'll be glad you had it when you have to take a ride in an ambulance. 401ks, I had heard of them, but certainly didn't know the details. They're a retirement account that your employer may provide to you as a benefit. It allows you to put part of your salary before it's taxed into an investment fund that grows without being taxed on a tax-deferred basis, meaning you pay tax when you take it out. Your employer may match your contribution. So if you don't contribute, that's like saying to your boss, no, you keep your money this week. So my challenge there is invest at least 10% of your salary into your 401k, and what I really like to say is max it out every year. My last bit of financial advice, I promise. At your age, long-term disability is far more important than health insurance or life insurance policies. Health insurance is very important. Chances are a friend of yours is going to try to sell you a life insurance policy. This is not something you buy out of guilt. So do your research. And most importantly, maintain your health. My 22-year-old self never thought I would experience rapid decline from sitting at a desk 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But it will happen to you too. So every hour and a half, walk to the coffee machine. If you can, cycle to work, request a stand-up desk, do anything, but don't lose your health. Number 3, it's all about the job. So I think of jobs as having a potential score of 4 points, each point coming from whether it provides personal growth, professional growth, compensation, and social impact. 4s are really hard to find. 1s and 2s are not ideal. And of course, with all things like this, there's a caveat. And as my dad would say, that caveat is a 4-letter word: boss. A boss can annihilate a 4, or it can raise a score of a 1 or a 2. So do your research. Ask your interviewer, what are the pros and the cons of working for this person? And listen to what they say and their body language. Because the first half of your career should be about getting more than you're giving. You should be with a boss that is invested in your well-being and should be surrounded by colleagues that want to help you learn. So if you find yourself giving more than you're getting in the first few years, you should reevaluate. My very last tip, promise, number 4, is be kind and help others. It's so easy today to be condescending and impatient, but it's so important to be kind and to genuinely smile. Generally speaking, people want to feel uplifted. They don't want to be around negativity and people that complain. So strive for positivity. This is really important when you're trying to land future jobs, because the majority of jobs come from people you know. Your network, at a minimum right now, are the people on your right and left. It will amaze you how they're going to pop into your life, even if you don't believe it. They may be a colleague, they may reach out to you on LinkedIn for help. Be kind to them. The last thing is about reaching out to each other, and this is something we could all improve on. Women. Studies show we do a horrible job reaching out to other women. And in engineering, there are so few of us. It makes no sense. Men, we're in a time of heightened awareness of equality and sexual harassment thanks to the Me Too movement, but don't let this scare you from mentoring other women. There's power in building bridges with people who are different from you. And the very last thing that I'll leave you with is one of my favorite sayings, which is, you are the average of your 5 closest friends. Are you proud of this person? And if not, do something about it. Congratulations, class of 2018.